I did a very deep dive on you, by the way. So I listened to a bunch of podcasts and watched all of your shows. But one of the things I
thanks,
heard you
man.
say, by the way, I love your show. We're going to get into that.
Thank you, brother.
One of the things I did hear you say, though, was you were talking about that social media does have a positive impact, but you're talking about animal conservation. I think you were talking about how you were worried about the negatives that kind of came along with that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I'd like to. Thank you for bringing that up. Now, of course, there are a lot of positive people doing very positive things, and I'm so thankful for them, and we need those people, and I don't want to sound discouraged or anything like that. But what I've kind of said over the years is, or over the last couple of years, is from what I've seen, I just worry that the net impact on our wildlife and its conservation through social media, I'm worried there's more of a negative impact than a positive one, and that's for many different reasons. Starting with, for example, I really started seeing this. I think I really started noticing it. That the net impact. I knew there was bad stuff. Like we see stuff and we're like, that's not great. But I really started worrying that the net impact might be a not good one, because the content that gets the furthest when it comes to animals, a lot of it's not great.
Yeah.
Yep.
And a lot of the good people doing good things, like the best people doing like the really real stuff, like they're in the trenches full on, they don't tend to have that big a following.
No,
They're also not filming it while they're doing it.
And they don't get the exposure.
Most of the people don't film
it. Exactly. Like their priorities are really in their work and what they're doing, and they don't have the expertise or necessarily the Wi-Fi ability because they're in the middle of whatever. Working with these animals, it's just not a realistic, part of their brand or their MBO, NGO or whatever they do.
Yeah.
Or an MPO, sorry. And so I mean, man, you see stuff like you see chimps playing on Instagram. You see chimps as looking like pets or wearing clothes and that kind of thing, and like that stuff gets so viral. It goes so far, and I think the underlying message of people appreciate these animals and they like chimps and they think they're cool, I think that's there. I don't think this is because people have the wrong, their heart's not in the right place, and and that they don't like these animals or don't want what's best for that individual or the species as a whole. And so that, I'm happy about that. The sad thing is there's so much ignorance. Okay, so when you spread content like that, a brutal reality of that is that it fuels the poaching industry of chimpanzees. And so when that gets really big, and we're talking about other places like certain parts of Southeast Asia. This happens in China too, but China obviously doesn't see our Instagram really.
Yeah.
But and then in Syria and other countries in the Middle East, people are like, I want a pet chimp, or like let's get a chimp and get him in like our little roadside zoo circus thing. Like not a good zoo, not a good situation, like not good. And let's we can have it do little tricks and have tourists pay to watch whatever. And it's horrible, man, because those chimps that get there, they're poached straight from the wild.
Yeah.
And an average of 10 chimps die every time a baby's abducted from the wild.
And they're accessible
and that's
to
because
everyday
they're
people. They're accessible.
Yeah, no, and people don't know that. People don't realize, this is bad, you guys. We don't want to share this and like it and comment and say, oh my God, how cute. Oh my God, I want one, blah, blah, blah. Like you're fueling one of the ugliest poaching industries, that I'm familiar with. And I mean, chimps are like us, that we have 99, 98, whatever percent roughly, give or take DNA similarities. And when you see chimps in the wild or in captivity, I mean, they really look like just really furry people with weird proportions compared to us. And their mannerisms, the way they act, the way they treat each other. I mean, they can be a little bit rough on each other, but dude, they're like little people. And so if you try to steal one of their babies, the entire family's going to fight to the death to make sure that doesn't happen. Yeah. So every other individual gets killed. And those animals are used for bushmeat, and I'm not saying that makes me feel that much better about it, but it's, they are feeding people, whatever. But that's an average of 10. I mean, it's often 20 or 30 member families that are dying because one baby has to get abducted and taken from the wild. And then, so chimps are a hardy primate species. We were talking about some veterinary stuff, and from the veterinary aspect, some primates are tougher than others.
Yeah.
And as an ape, chimps are tough, man.
Yeah.
They can really go through hell and back physically, and come back and be relatively physically healthy. But it goes to show you when 8 to 9 out of 10 of the babies that are taken from the wild die before they reach their final destination.
Jesus.
Because of the horrible conditions. They're sitting in the back of a trunk for days or weeks on end. They're tied up on a rope, not getting food and water. Like, they're just, they're not going to survive that. No animal will.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, when you see a chimp, and it is somebody's pet in Syria, or it is at a little zoo in China, an average of 100 chimps died to get that baby there, between all the babies and the family members, right? So social media fuels that, and that breaks my heart. And that content gets so much engagement. And then you see other profiles where they're, I'm sure you guys are familiar with or saw Tiger King, right? I mean, that was huge in the animal world and the whole world.
It was only a year ago.
That's a horrible industry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a fucked industry, and it shouldn't be a thing. And people support it because they don't know any better.
That's the big thing.
It was the drama aspect. It was the reality show aspect of it that fueled everything, and it went viral, and people talking about it, and like, oh, they took sides. They took sides between characters.
Oh, 100%.
Like, they were all terrible.
I think, like you're saying,
no, that's what people don't realize. There's no protagonist in that story.
Like, there's no
good guy doing good things. They're all super sketchy. They're all bad news. And just to clarify what I meant, people also support even the cub petting.
Yeah.
And cub petting's no bueno, man. I mean,
no.
That's just one of the biggest disasters in captive wildlife. And we're breeding tigers to be able to be pet for like 2 months of their life legally. It's only supposed to be a month or two, maybe a month in some states. And then these facilities don't have the means to keep, all 8 or 6 or however many babies that a mama has, and it can be a lot. And then they have to go find new homes. And so they get sold to some other shitty zoo that's not doing anything for conservation. They're just trying to make some money off people. Or worst case, they get shipped to, Thailand or somewhere where they're going to be in some crappy zoo there. Yeah. And what's legal in zoos there is shocking and very disappointing. And then, of course, a lot of those animals are slaughtered for animal parts to go on the black market because that's where they're really going to cash in. And it's much easier to pull that off in countries like that. And they're already in the markets. They're selling them in Southeast Asia. So, that stuff gets big on social media. And then we talk about one of the biggest problems is, in addition to these, is that there's so many bullshit organizations saying, "Hey, we want to help this wildlife. We want to help this habitat. Like, if you donate to us, we'll make a difference." And then if you look at their numbers, or what their conservation work is, dude, they're not doing shit. They're not doing anything for conservation. They put a little bit of money here, or they protect some animals that don't really need that protection. Like, it really needs to go to other animals. Yeah. And so for me, those people are worse than poachers. They're as bad as anybody because you know better. Yeah. You fucking know what you're doing. You're taking money from the animals that need it. You know what the problem is. You're not. I mean, at least poachers are like, yeah, dude.
This is what I do.
I want to make money. Like, they're not lying to your face. They're not. I mean, they're not.
These people are pocketing charity money and not actually.
They're taking money from animals. Like, people that give it are like, I want to help these animals. Yeah. That's what's important to me. I want this to go back to the animals, and it's not for many of these companies. It's just not. Yeah. And it's like, you're taking money that should be going to the animals and super needed. Like our rhino crisis. That's my next trip. I'm leaving in less than a week to go trim 40 rhino horns, 40 rhinos' horns, so like 80 horns, right? Because we want to, they're less vulnerable to poaching when we take their horns off. We can talk more about that. But man, there's so many organizations saying they're going to help out with rhino and wildlife, and they're not.